Hi, everyone. Let's go ahead and get a roll call. If you are here, I'm going to say your name. If you are here, please unmute your phone and let us know. Just so the public's aware, we're having a bit of technical difficulties. While we would love to have our panelists be able to be seen, they are going to be heard. And so we just want to make sure we have a roll call so we can start with our program. So, Clinton, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you. Miracle, are you on the line?
I'm here.
Evelyn, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am.
Bryce, are you on the line?
I'm
Bryce?
here.
Perfect. Aaron, are you on the line? No, Aaron. I see Mr. Frank is on. Chief Assistant Cheryl Victorian, are you on the line?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you.
Officer Ronald Prince, are you on the line? Officer Tim Whitaker, are you on the line?
I am here.
Diego Castillo, are you on the line? Diego,
Yes,
are
ma'am.
you on the line? Yes, okay. Angela, are you on the line?
Here.
Perfect. Avery, are you on the line?
I'm on.
Avery, was that you?
Yes, that's me.
Thank you. We have Councilmember Thomas as well as Vice Mayor Pro Tem Cassix Tatum. With that, please let's go ahead and get started, and note that we do not have Officer Prince or Aaron on the line, so we will move on as needed.
Thank you so much, Sherelle. Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilmember Tiffany D. Thomas, and tonight, myself and my colleague, we get the privilege of holding space for you tonight around us having a robust discussion around public safety and young voices. And so all of us are very well aware of what's been happening the last few weeks, and not even the weeks, but I would offer you for decades and centuries in our country. And I think what we're witnessing is, like everything's coming together. And what I witnessed from the young people for the Alief Black Lives Matter March was remarkable. And so I'm representing Alief on City Council in several different neighborhoods. I thought it was my responsibility to not quench the fire, but to support your voices and your vision for how you would like to reimagine public safety and engaging with law enforcement. So we offered you this opportunity. So I want to thank you for your leadership with leading a wonderful, impactful, peaceful march not too long ago, about a month or so ago, and you really left a wonderful impression on the community. And this opportunity is for you to have robust dialogue to talk about solutions as you grow up in the community and then beyond, and how you can be a part of those solutions. I just want to say that, the council members that are joining and the HPD staff and the other adults on the call today, that we're big enough to hear all of your complaints, and we're grown enough and we have thick skin. But I also want to remind you that this is an opportunity for you to help offer solutions to the city. And so I look forward to listening to meaningful conversation because as young people, you get to make an ask about what you would like to see in your community, and we would like to join with you in making that happen. So I want to introduce the Vice Mayor Pro Tem of our city, Councilmember Martha Castex Tatum. As soon as she heard that we were doing this, she says District K has to be a part of this. So I'm glad that she's joining us tonight, and I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I'm so excited about what's about to happen tonight. Hearing our youth talk about public safety is vital. Hearing from our young constituents is vital. And I say this all the time, but the reality is democracy is learned, and it is up to us to make sure that our future generations, the young people in our city, in our country, in our world, know the power of their voices, and that they know the power of meaningful engagement. So a lot of heavy incidents are happening in our country, and as adults and elected officials, we want to hear from the young people. We want to hear what's important for your mental wellness, for your feelings of security, for your growth individually, for your growth in your communities. I'm proud of the work that you have put in over the last couple of weeks, and the work that you do to make your communities better. This is a time where the world is united in our humanness. And so we are going to hear from you. I'm ready to listen. I want to hear your words. I want to hear your hearts. And I want to commit to you that we are listening and we are ready to walk alongside you, work alongside you to make real actionable change happen. It is us against racism. It is us against all of the injustices in our world. And we can be the change that we want to see in the world. So I'm ready to listen. Let's get this conversation started.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Clinton Orifat, and first, I would like to say thank you to everyone that's on this call. It means a lot for you to be able to take this time out of your day and to be able to actually listen. I'm going to be your moderator for tonight, and just as a reminder, at the end of this call and at the end of the night, we'll have an opportunity for the public to ask any questions that they have within the chat. In order for your question to be asked, you have to write it in the Q&A inbox. So today we're going to be beginning the night with the welcoming remarks from the council members. Well, actually, we already got to those. So now we can go through our opening statements from Diego Castillo and Angela Quiajon.
Okay, I'm Diego. Just want to go ahead and say thank you to the council and everybody here for giving me the opportunity and just listening to what I have to say. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Trust in law enforcement and the city council is at an all-time low, and the house divided cannot stand. Right now is not the time to bicker and dispute and antagonize the other side, but rather to cooperate and create meaningful, lasting solutions. The City Council and HPD, many of you try to talk as if you stand with the youth and the Black Lives Matter movement, but your actions have continuously broken the trust of the people that you're supposed to serve, such as how Acevedo opposed cash bail reform or how all of our council members are lobbied by the police union. Instead of focusing on the past, we must turn to the future and decide what are the best steps to move forward. Council members, you must stand by your word and pass reforms on the HPD. Enough talk because we need more action. Current checks on the HPD are not anywhere near strong enough. And civilians often have to go directly to the HPD to make complaints about officers, which is obviously way less than ideal. It's important that the council creates an independent investigative board with subpoena power that can investigate complaints made by civilians. Even further, it is important to mandate at least annual and physical and psychological exams on officers to ensure that they are fit to carry the badge. If you're an officer and you cannot handle the stress of the job, then you should not be an officer at all. The HPD often claims to stand with the youth in the Black Lives Matter calls for justice, but their actions do not say the same. This is how several officers within my own local county are a part of the lobbying group CLEAT, which consistently uses money and misinformation to stop the text legislature's reform for attempts at reform on the police departments. If you're truly a good-hearted officer, then you shouldn't fear reform or an investigative board, as you had nothing to hide. The only cops who fear investigation are cops who are guilty of doing something, and these cops do not belong in the HPD and do not deserve the privilege of serving our beautiful city. Whenever the city council and the HPD says one thing but does not follow up on their word, the city loses trust in its officials. To all of you listening, right now is the time. The whole city is watching. If you truly stand with us, you must drop CLEAT, you must stop the lobbying, you must stand with us and pass necessary police reform. Otherwise, the community's trust in the council and the HPD will only continue to plummet.
Thank you so much, Diego. Angela?
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Angela. I hope everybody's doing well today. We are waiting on the world to change. Lately, people have been questioning police work and integrity. There has been unnecessary and police brutality, even during peaceful protests. We wonder, do they hear our cries or just what they want to hear? Although the world prides itself on freedom such as speech, we have to come to terms that it wasn't written for us African-American citizens of the United States of America. Racism is a cycle that keeps on reliving itself. Are we ever truly free? Even though without us, there wouldn't be no America. Because of the color of my skin, people are threatened by me without knowing my character. And now we say enough is enough. Black lives matter. We say this because our people have been oppressed, especially by the police. They are supposed to protect us as a whole, but now Black men have to teach their young kings how to stay safe from the police interactions. I know that it is hard to believe that the people you look for safety and security are the same people causing us so much harm. And I am not lying. I am not delusional. I am scared and I am hurting and we are dying. And I really, really need you to believe me. Spoken by Nigerian-American writer, Miss Olu. So now we march till we hear freedom bells ring. We educate ourselves so we know our rights. We promote movement and sign petitions for the world to see. Black kings and queens, you are not alone. Your voice will be heard. Moving forward, we want more sensitivity trainings of officers who will serve the people. We want police who won't look at a person as a suspect or a criminal because of the color of their skin. We want true justice that is justified. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those inspirational words on both parts. We'll now begin tonight's discussion, and we'll have Avery Robinson introduce our panelists and their biographies.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Avery Robinson. I am an upcoming sophomore at Westbury High School. I am also a member of the Mayor Youth Council, and I am representing District D. Tonight, I'll be introducing the panelists. First, we have Evelyn Bustos. She is a rising senior at Alief Hastings High School. She plans to help her community by giving back. Next, we have Clinton Oriofe. He is a rising senior at Alief Hastings High School, and he serves as a class president for the class of 2021. Next, we have Bryce Robertson. He is a recent graduate from Willowridge High School. In the fall, he will attend the University of Houston. Next, we have Serenity Coleman. She will attend James Madison High School, and she will be a senior. Next, we have Miracle Weatherspoon. She is a rising high school senior who is also a youth intern for the Houston City Council, District K. Next, we have Francisco Garcia. At the age of 17, he started his dedication advocating in his community to bring improvements in services. Next, we have Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian. She is a native historian and a 26-year veteran of the Houston Police Department. Next, we have Officer Ronald Prince. He is a native Houstonian and has served as a Houston police officer for 24 years. Last, we have Officer Tim Whitaker. He is with Westside Police Station. He joined HPD in 1986 and was an evening patrol officer until June 2019, 33 years. These are our panelists. Let's get this show started.
Perfect. Let's get this started indeed. Thank you so much, Avery. We'll now move on to the first discussion of the night. We'll be asking HPD and Frank Garcia questions. I'm going to be asking the first question, actually. I'm sorry, give me 3 seconds. My laptop just tripped all the way out.
You're fine.
It's okay, Clinton. How about I ask the question while you pull up your information?
Please,
So
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
It's not a problem. Things happen. So Clinton's question to Mr. Frank Garcia is, tell me about the work you do in the community and its relation to HPD.
All right. Well, thank you very much, council members, the panel, and the youth that is leading this discussion. My name is Francisco Garcia. I represent the City of Houston's Health Department, the Bureau of Youth and Adolescent Health, and also My Brother's Keeper. So just a brief background, MBK initially started in 2014 as a call to action nationwide by President Barack Obama after the murder of Trayvon Martin. And the MBK call to action was to focus on providing the necessary support and the pillars, the vital pillars in identifying those milestones that would help Black and Brown youth and young adults be able to succeed in life. So through these efforts, our director, Stephen Williams, was able to accept that challenge and activate that call to action in identifying 6 milestones. These milestones identified as getting a healthy start, entering school ready to learn, reading at a grade level by 3rd grade, graduating from high school and getting ready for college and identifying their career path, completing post-secondary education or training, also successfully entering the workforce, and last but not least, keeping kids on track and giving them a second chance. So through these efforts, we were able to develop a collective impact model by identifying nonprofit key leaders in the community, different stakeholders, and being able to bring them to the table and identify each milestone which already currently aligns with their existing efforts. And then how can we be able to now amplify those efforts to be able to reach our youth and young adults? And then from there, being able to now brainstorm new initiatives that are outside of the box to be able to now support our youth and further expand their support that they're receiving from these milestones. Currently, my work was more focused on community engagement, parental engagement, youth engagement. So in the feeder areas that were identified in the city of Houston, our effort was to really target those campuses from elementary to high school, identifying what were the existing gaps, tier 1 social services that were in dire need. And then from there, being able to bring these leaders and stakeholders that had been at the table and had been activated and ready to now engage in these milestones to start to fill in these gaps and to identify what are the root issues of why these gaps existed. How did they get to this point? Where did the communication fall? And how can we make sure not to have it repeat itself again? And so through those efforts, hosting college and career fairs, making sure that we develop councils that focus on either career and workforce development or through the juvenile justice system, providing youth with a second chance. These efforts were to also be able to provide a net of support and also a networking support. But also not only that we focused on, but it was primarily also to engage the youth and young adults, the community, the parents, to really open up these discussions as right now a great example of that platform that is being provided for youth and young adults to be able to be heard, to have a safe space to speak, and to also identify, not only identifying what are the problems, but starting to work on what are the solutions. And as Councilmember Thomas mentioned, we have thick skins. This has been going on for decades. We have to learn from our previous mistakes, what has worked, what has not. How are we going to step out of our comfort zones? How are we going to think outside of the box and take the initiative to really start developing real solutions, real concrete solutions that hold accountability, transparency, and also bring back the power to the community, the voice that they have, the actions that they show, and also in that process, being able to show the community as what we've seen nationwide and really not even having to show no more. It's being very present and visible that the community is very powerful. The people in our communities around the country have a very powerful voice, very powerful presence, very strong energy. And all of this is pushing for the greater good to be able to end the things that we've been seeing nationwide. So bringing that back to Houston and MBK and the work that I do is continuing to provide those safe spaces and the leadership skills and training required to help our people in our community start to put those visions into a strategic plan. And then from that plan, start to identify action items. And from those action items, starting to apply pressure and hold people accountable and demand transparency. So that's my take.
Francisco, would you mind briefly just letting our listeners and viewers know where you're from? I think it's important for our young voices, it's important that we have examples of what our future could look like. And I think it's important for them to know a little bit about your history, your actual work, and how you were doing some of this at their age as well.
Yes, absolutely, council member. Thank you very much. So I'm a native Houstonian, born and raised in the southwest side of Houston in Alief. Went to Snead Elementary, Owens Intermediate, O'Donnell Middle School, Elsik High School. I was only in Elsik for a few months due to my behavior. I grew up in a very rough background, very poor family. My father worked as much as he could. Background, I'm Mexican American, first generation born. So we faced a lot of barriers growing up, and I grew up in apartment complexes, and as y'all know, on the southwest side of Houston, we're very well known for being densely populated with apartment complexes from Alief all the way into Gulfton and Sharpstown. So through that upbringing and growing up in the environment that I did, it wasn't very positive or conducive to my growth and development. So through that, I encountered many barriers, some that were obviously lack of resources and due to the environment and lack of resources in education and in the community. Faced many challenges in my high school years. I was sent to alternative school. You know, I was in alternative school from beginning to end for about 3 years. And those were very impactful for me because I knew that I was dealing with issues as well. But in this alternative school that I was in, I also saw many of my peers, Black, brown, white, Asian, a very diverse group. One of the very common things that we had was that, you know, we came from poor backgrounds, you know, broken homes, very little to no support when it came to what were really our needs, why were we behaving or struggling in the situations we did. So kind of moving forward through that, I had to take my own route, find myself. I knew that I was dealing also with issues with mental health, depression, self-isolating myself, really not asking for help, and that backfired. So through that process and growth, also I was a young father. I was a father at 17. So that was a whole nother world that was introduced to me, and there was changes that needed to take place with myself. And so through that transformation, it wasn't easy. I had to admit to myself that I needed to change. If I wanted to help others and take care of others, I first had to identify what was my root issue, and how can I identify that support. And through that process and evaluation in my community, I started to realize that I wasn't the only one facing those challenges. In the early 2000s, Alief, the zip code in Alief was one of the top 10 zip codes that was a high contributor to the youth incarceration. So we had a lot of young people that were going from the school to prison pipeline, you know, going from the juvenile detention center, moving on out to Harris County. And so this was a big problem. Both of my older brothers had faced those challenges. I see the struggles that my mother had to endure because of that. And that was something that I direly tried to avoid as much as possible. But through the evaluation of my community, I started to realize that there was very little to no support, no infrastructure that really supported the growth and development of youth. Opportunities for employment, opportunities or access to mental health, access to medical care, and then also just internally as we were growing through the process in the education system, we were falling through the cracks. You know, if we acted up or we were acting out or there was issues that we were bringing to light, you know, we would be sent to alternative school. So that became a start where I needed to now take action and start to organize. And so through that process, at the age of 19, we created a youth group called Unified Hoods. The acronym for Hoods, HOODS, meant helping out others during struggles. So it was unified, helping out others during struggles. And these were youth and young adults, just like myself, really trying to find a place in the world, trying to have a voice, trying to be heard. And so we started to attend meetings, started to address some of the gaps that we noticed in the community. One of the things that we really pinpointed was the lack of services and activity at the Alief Community Center. Very centralized to the community within a 2-mile radius of over 5-6 different campuses. And majority of the time, a lot of the youth you would see would hang out at local businesses, and either if they didn't purchase anything, they became a nuisance to the business. And so there you had, again, that cycle of calling the police on youth, not breaking the law, but because you were at the wrong place at the wrong time, you would happen to find yourself into some trouble with the laws. So we started to advocate. We started to attend community meetings, started to press heavily on the needs of the community. We started to petition. We started to canvass, phone bank. We started to get people registered to vote. We would go to public hall sessions. We gradually started to build up our presence and our voice, and not for us, but for the community and the needs of the community. So pretty much in a nutshell, that's how I initially started with a nonprofit, and gradually grew from there, learned more and more through the mentorship of many great individuals that helped me and guided me in my life.
Thanks for that. And
Amazing.
I know Clinton's coming back on, and so I think we're going to talk more about that. Once Clinton joins us, he's going to introduce the rest of the panelists, and I'm sure there's more we'll like to hear about that. Thank you. Clinton, are you on?
Thank you.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Okay, you got it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Garcia. It was amazing. But I believe we have another question for you. And the question is, with all that you said, and with the bringing of My Brother's Keeper, what change do you want to see with the police department?
Well, the change that I would like to see really echoes what our city, what our state, what our nation is really trying to see, and which is an end to the violence, the killing, just the practices that we've repeatedly seen on TV, and not even on TV, through social media, through our own mobile devices, even in physical presence, being able to see an end to that. And I think that that question, through my perspective and how I lay it out, is more of an answer that blends in with the collective of the masses, of what we all want to see. Transparency. We want to see the de-escalation of violence when it comes to interaction with Black and Brown communities. The reallocation of funding into the communities when we talk about education, when we talk about mental health, when we talk about resources, really supporting the nonprofits on the ground that are really doing the legwork to get youth and young adults, both male and female, Black and Brown, in opportunity spaces where they can get exposure to career, to knowing their rights, to not having to be afraid when they encounter the police. Also, seeing the mandatory requirement of accountability on the police as well. The police that have been practicing repeatedly behavior that is completely inappropriate, and being held accountable, being entered into a database where if they are reprimanded and they're no longer able to work at one department, that they can't just easily jump to another location and being able to get employed at another location. Also, allowing the community to be able to voice their opinion, and when doing so, not having to be judged or cast away as being always angry and negative. I think those are the things that I would like to see, and I would love to see just these conversations where we talk about how these efforts will work, where we can collectively be able to meet on a common ground. And when I mean on a common ground, I mean the community, because the community itself, we have different perspectives of how we want to see this take place. And I think in every little bit of element where we share that, many points are very valid and made, where I think we can accomplish that. It won't happen overnight. And I know when we talk about y'all are the future, and that's definitely true. Y'all are the future. We are all the future, because if we don't act upon what we do now, then what we don't do or what we do now will really take its shape and form on how the future will be molded. So I think that's something to always think about, that our actions now will really shape and shift how that future looks like for all of us. And so again, I don't want to see any more Black or brown people being killed on the streets for senseless reasons. I want us to be able to live in peace, so that we don't have another George Floyd, another Joe Luis Castellanos. We don't have another Breonna Taylor. We don't have another Nicholas Chavez. We don't have another Sandra Bland, another Christopher Aguirre. We want to make sure those names first are not lost in vain, and that we always remember, but that name list doesn't continue to grow. So that's,
I agree so much.
That's what I would like.
I agree so much. Thank you so much. I agree that we need accountability and everything else. You hit all the spots. Now I believe that Miracle, you have a couple of questions you would like to ask.
Yes, thank you, Clinton. To Officer Whitaker and Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian, what has been your driving force to become a police officer?
Yeah, this is Tim Whitaker. and I'll go first and let the chief go after me. But the driving force that made me want to be a police officer is I always wanted to be one. And when I graduated high school, it was a little overwhelming for me to get on the department. There was an incredible amount of a background check and stuff that was going on. And as a 19-year-old, that was a little scary. So I decided to put it on hold for a while. And then again, when I became 24, it was that still wanting to be a police officer. So I went down and I fought the battle on all of the paperwork, the mounds of paperwork, the mounds of the unbelievable background check that went on, and decided I wanted to go ahead and do it. And the reason I wanted to do it is a little bit like Frank. I grew up very poor. I grew up in a broken home, and I knew what it is like to be in a broken home, to be tossed back and forth between parents. And I wanted to go out there. I wanted to do the very best that I could do, to let others know that there was some hope out there, that you could come from a broken home, that you could come from being poor, and you could do something and make something of yourself. And I will tell you, it's 34 years I've been a police officer this month. And although the country and the agency and the young people of America, which I'm very excited to be a part of this phone call, we're all hurting very much. But I think meetings like this, unfortunately, I don't get to see your faces because of whatever, but I think these kind of meetings will help tremendously.
Great. Thank
Amazing.
you, Tim. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
This is Cheryl Victorian. I'm the Assistant Chief with Houston Police Department. I've been on the department for 27 years. And first of all, I just want to say that I'm very inspired by the youth and their leadership and their engagement and working cooperatively to build better relationships between the youth and the police. It is very necessary, and like Officer Whitaker, I am honored to be a part of this conversation and move in the direction for change. What made me become a police officer? I'll be honest with you. When I was a young kid, I was deathly afraid of police officers. My mom would take me to the local store, and I'm a native Houstonian. I grew up in Sunnyside. I worked the area that I patrolled when I became a police officer. But when growing up in the neighborhood at a local store, it's called Watkins on Cullen, and it's still there. My mom would take me to see the constable, and I would fall out crying when she would try to introduce us. And that wasn't because my family had any negative interactions with the police, but I was just afraid of the police. And my father died when I was 9. My mom raised 4 kids, and I was 9. My older sister was 15. My middle sister was 14. I was 9. My brother was 5. And when we lost my dad and we got ready to escort him to the funeral, before we got in the car, the compassion that was shown to us by the solo motorcycles and the level of respect that they received as we traveled the roads outside of the city of Houston, it just mesmerized me. And I think it was my young mind. I just needed something else to focus on because we were going to bury my dad. And so that was the spark that ignited me and wanted me to become a police officer. And then at the time, I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference, right? And then you start seeing the cop shows, and Councilmember Tatum, Vice Mayor Pro Tem knows this all too well. I used to be Miami Vice. I thought I was Miami Vice. So I wanted the opportunity to work undercover and put the bad guys in jail. And then I got the opportunity to become a police officer, and my whole perception of policing, it changed. And it went back to wanting to help people and wanting to make a difference. And here I am 27 years later in a profession that I love, but absolutely hurting. I was telling roll call today at Southeast on the night of May the 25th, when I saw this man before my very eyes being killed by somebody who wore a uniform that looked like mine. I was devastated, and I knew the impact that it would have on my profession, and I was angry. And then that Thursday night before our first protest on Friday night, when I watched the city of Minneapolis pretty much burned down and a police station burned, I sobbed, and I sobbed like a baby, because all of these emotions were overtaking me with where we were and where we were about to go. And as a Black female, I was walking the fine line as a police officer and as an African American. But to be honest, I think this is the ground floor for significant change in law enforcement in our communities.
Chief, that is wonderful. Powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues are on the call as well. Councilmember Sally Alcorn and Councilmember Abby Kamen, who's our chair of public safety. So she's listening in to the dialogue as well. And I'm sure both of them are taking plenty of notes. So thank y'all for joining the young people today.
Perfect. Miracle, I believe you have another question for the officers.
Yes, I do. What percentage of your officers on patrol are from the neighborhoods they patrol?
So Miracle, I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you that there are a small percentage of Houston police officers that probably work in the areas they patrol. I am an example of that. I grew up, like I said, in Sunnyside, and I am a product of the neighborhood that I patrolled. When I first got out of the academy, I wanted to go back to Southeast Houston, and that's where I had the opportunity to go. I had the opportunity to patrol there, the opportunity to work as a gang task force officer there, and also when I promoted to sergeant, guess what? I wanted to go back to Southeast Houston and Sunnyside, and I had the opportunity to do that. And now as an assistant chief, I'm responsible for the southeast portion of Houston. So I don't have the number for you of how many officers actually live or grew up in the areas where they worked, but I am a product of my neighborhood.
And I think that's a good question to ask. And what a lot of people are, interested in is that if you're from the neighborhood, then you can build better relationship. And I think, and I'm sure our young people during Q&A will like to offer some of those things around that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to support the young people with having officers from the command stations that they actually live. So Officer Whitaker is at Westside right here on Derry Ashford. And Chief, you have extensive history in a variety of places in Houston, but as you spoke to, and I think it's, when we can build relationships, we can see each other's humanity. So thanks for sharing that.
Hey, Councilmember Thomas and also Miracle, I can tell you this, that I work in an office here at Westside of 9 people. And so when I saw these questions today, I went around the room and 4 of the 9 that are in my office all went to Alief. So I was a little shocked by that information too, which I thought was pretty cool that they're patrolling the areas where they went to school. And I think part of that too is, and Chief Victorian can help me out on this one, we don't, when we get out of the academy and we're young officers, we don't necessarily get to pick where we go patrol. The department sends us out to where the most need is for that time as rookie officers. So if you're a young officer and you start buying a house, you buy a house maybe where you started to patrol or where you hope to patrol, and then as you promote, like Chief Victorian has done throughout your career, sometimes it can be a little difficult to get back to home. And so so for some there's a lot that do return back to where they went to school. And for me, I went out to Cy-Fair, try not to hold that against me, but that's not the city of Houston.
Appreciate. Thank you for adding that. That's a good fun fact. I didn't know that as well. So that's good to know. Thank you. Go ahead, Clinton.
Amazing. Thank you so much, officers. Both of your answers provided so much insight, especially from me as like a youth looking. I didn't see that it could have much more meaning. I would rather think that some just go into the profession just to go into the profession, but seeing that some of you guys have a lot meaning going towards it, it definitely changed my perspective. We can now move on to Evelyn asking a question. Evelyn?
Yes, thank you, Clinton. So my questions will be towards Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian. And my first question is, during the training that police undergo through, are they tested or go through a physiological test to ensure that they're in a good state of mind? And if no, why not?
That's a great question, Evelyn. Psychological testing is indeed part of the hiring phase for the Houston Police Department. Candidates have the opportunity to individually speak with trained psychologists and undergo a series of psychological tests. But there are no right or wrong answers in these psychological tests. And the purpose is designed to determine job suitability. It's not to determine one's mental or psychological health. Now, although some of the responses may be indicative of mental health or psychological health reasons that may keep someone out, but that is not the purpose of the test. The test asks about behaviors, about their thoughts, their family background, their history of, with relationships, the drinking habits, their career goals. They may have a few stress-related questions, but those are the focus of the questions. And I personally know 3 people that are very close to me who were denied the opportunity to become Houston police officers because they were told they failed the psychological test. And these were people I thought were pretty sharp people.
Wow.
So it's not, I said that to say that not everybody gets through it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Bryce asking a question to Officer Whitaker.
So, Mr. Whitaker, my question was, what role do you think the Black Lives Matter movement plays? Do you think it's just more of a victim mindset thing, Democrats trying to get votes? Do you think it's actually garnering attention to the right place? Do you think it's just separating us, adding fuel to the fire, whether by race or state or authority? I wanted to know your opinion on that.
Bryce, that is an amazing question, and it is so hard to believe that you guys are such young people and you're able to ask these unbelievable questions. First off, call me Tim. This is certainly informal, and when it's informal, I want to be called by my name, just like with you. I think Black Lives Matter, the movement, is gaining a lot of attention. Like you said, some positive, some negative. But here's what I'll tell you, what I have seen, and this is from personal experience. I have been out here at Westside my entire career, which includes the Alief area. So for 34 years, I've been out here. We take all citizens, and Chief Victorian can jump in whenever she's ready, but we take all citizens' critique very, very seriously. We have a public service job. And the public does not just mean white people. It does not just mean Alief. It does not mean the people off of Memorial. It means all citizens, and it's all public. And so that's what we do out here is we take all critiques. And even during this time of the Black Lives Matters and some of the things that are being brought up by that organization, it's good to hear, because for me, I think it puts us back to a place where we too start doing some soul searching. And the greatest thing about the police department, and I am one of those guys that I am drinking the HPD Kool-Aid. We have 200 external complaints a year. That means 200 citizens complain on us, 5,000 officers a year, and there are 800 internal complaints. So not only do we listen to the all citizens critique, do we not take care of public service, a great job of doing public service, but I think we do a great job of internally policing ourselves.
So can I add something to that, Bryce?
Yes.
This is Cheryl Victorian. So I had a young person ask me this question yesterday as a Black female. And they ended the question with, how do you feel when someone says, after we say Black Lives Matter, that all lives matter? Well, I'm sorry that you can't see me either. I've been a Black female for 50 years. I've been a police officer for 27. So like I said earlier, I walk a very fine line. But what I think is being missed is that no one is saying Black Lives Matter more than anyone else. It's just saying that we are human too and that we matter. It doesn't seem by the way that we're being treated that we matter, but we do matter. So I think that with a better understanding, every people that say, okay, yeah, all lives matter, would have to have the intellectual courage to kind of back down and say, okay, what exactly are they meaning by this? You know, so I think that's a great question, and thank you very much for allowing me to jump in.
Well, I agree so much. Bryce, I believe you have another question to add on.
Oh, okay, yeah, because this was a bit off script, but her name was Miss Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay, so with that specifically, what would you say to somebody who would think, usually all this uproar only comes when it's an assumed race-based incident, but when it's not, there's no uproar. Do you think that this isn't the biggest problem that we have to deal with in terms of the minority Black community? Kind of just like gaslighting a problem that matters, but doesn't matter as much as we are harming ourselves.
So what I understand this question to mean is it just for the moment? Black Lives Matter movement and the fire that's been ignited right now is not just because of George Floyd. It's because of all the systematic racism and the injustices experienced by Black people. So do I just think that, this is something we're gaslighting? No. And I think that it has garnered so much attention that now all of this systemic racism, injustices, inequalities are being looked at. So I don't think it's just something that's being gaslighted.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Okay. Perfect. Now it's my turn to ask a question. This question is to Chief Cheryl as well, again. Have you ever encountered any officers that have made generalities about minorities? If so, how did you address this specifically?
So I thought this was a great question, and I don't know if this is the response that you're going to expect, but I haven't personally since I've been a chief or actually in a supervisory role, heard anybody come to me as a supervisor and make any generalized comments. But I have recently had an IED investigation where generalities were made about minorities, but guess what? It was made by somebody of the same race. So we think that just because we said it, it makes it okay. But it does not. It's still a respect issue, and it was addressed in an IED complaint, and those persons that made those generalizations
Stars Chief, can you unmute yourself and continue your statement? Well, let me just say this. I think that was a good question that Bryce had offered. And I think what's important for those that are listening, what the chief had mentioned is about the moment, right? So there's two things happening at one time. We are completely in the middle of the moment, but the moment will once pass and we still have work to do. All of us will have work to do. And so we have work to do collectively as a community, as a city, as a state, just the United States. We all have work to do to unravel and unlearn biases that we might all be possessing. But then also individually, I want you to think about how you find yourself in this moment individually, and then how you find yourself moving forward, and how you show up and some next steps and how we work together to make that happen. I do believe the chief is back on and is able to finish her story. Chief, are you with us? You were talking about your internal affairs. Yeah, the internal affairs case.
Investigation about the officers that made the generalities. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, we think that just because we make the statement and the generality, it's okay. It's not okay. And we expect others that don't look like us to be punished harsher than what we would be punished if we made these same generalizations. But I think it starts with us, okay? And then as a result of this generalization, it was turned into an IED investigation. And just to show you how this process worked, a sergeant was doing a body-worn camera audit and witnessed these actions of these officers and dropped an IED investigation. So that process, I trust. And so as a result of that investigation, those officers received respect for other sites. And it's ongoing. It's at the chief's office now for the final discipline.
Okay, perfect. So do you believe that the police should be policing themselves? And if that's possible, then what would it look like?
Okay, so I had the opportunity to work internal affairs as an investigative sergeant. You have to be a sergeant in order to work in internal affairs. Now, I have been on the department. At the time that I went to IED, I had about 17 years on the department. Nope, 19 years on the department. And I had two complaints where I had time off, and those were for accidents, both of them. One I had a 1-day suspension, and one I had a 2-day suspension for being in an accident. I had no other complaints. So that's one of the criteria for being able to go into Internal Affairs Division. Your prior discipline is reviewed. I had the opportunity to work in Internal Affairs as an investigator, as a proactive officer, meaning that I worked undercover in order to catch police officers who were conducting, doing criminal activity. So I do think that it's possible for police officers to be able to police themselves. And in the example that I just gave you, that wasn't something a citizen complained about. That was something that a supervisor saw in a video and submitted it for an Internal Affairs Division investigation. Once an Internal Affairs Division investigation is completed, it goes through several processes. And in those serious complaints, in those complaints involving officer-involved shootings, or excessive use of force, or respect for others, they go to what we call our big IAD. And big IAD, after the lieutenant reviews the case and come up with sustained sites, that goes to a committee. It goes to the Independent Police Officer Board, which is made up of all citizens selected by the mayor. And after they review the case, it goes to another committee, which is that Administrative Discipline Committee. That committee is made up of officers of every rank, as well as 4 citizens. And they come together and agree upon a recommended discipline. They send it to the chief, and the chief reviews the case. He reviews the discipline, and then he makes his final recommendation from there. And that process, to me, that I was involved in, I think it works. It works for us, and we have citizens who have the input into just recommended discipline and are able to ask questions about any of the investigations that we conduct.
Okay, perfect. So since there's that clear hierarchy in terms of influence that there is within the police department, how can me, a 17-year-old, be able to file a complaint on a police officer?
So then I heard someone mention earlier that you have to come down to 1200 Travis to file an Internal Affairs Division complaint. And there are other options. Yes, you can go to 1200 Travis to file an Internal Affairs complaint, but you can also go to your local patrol station and speak to any supervisor and file a complaint. You can also go to the Houston Police Department's website and get a complaint affidavit. All you have to do is fill that complaint out, and you can take it to a notary of your choice, and you can mail it in. You don't even have to come to the, to either the division level or Travis. And then you can go to community organizations such as LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, or you can go to the Urban League, or you can go to NAACP to file complaints on police officers.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So now we can move on to Miracle. I believe you should have a question to Officer Prince.
Officer Prince, in many recent cases of police shooting, police cameras have either crashed or turned off, or the content has simply disappeared. What measures are you taking to make sure this does not happen again?
Well, our department, we use cameras. We use body cameras. And for the most part, we use those body cameras to film every activity, not just shooting, but our day-to-day activity. And from time to time, when we're in the field, the camera may die. At that point, we notify a supervisor over the air. That supervisor gives us permission to get a new camera. So what we try to do is always have a body camera working and operating to record our activity.
Perfect. Miracle, I believe you have another question.
Yes, sir. Do you believe that police self-defense can be mistaken for police violence or be justified to use force against civilians?
Do I think police self-defense? Well, we're trying to use the force necessary to effect an arrest. So we try to refer back to our training in order to take a suspect into custody and never to abuse anyone. Part of our policy, if we see someone being abused or mishandled, that we have to intervene and make sure that that person is safe.
Perfect. Okay. So now, Evelyn, I believe that you should have a question for both Frank Garcia and Officer Prince.
Yes, thank you, Clinton. My question for Frank Garcia and Officer Prince, is reimagining public safety. How can young people take steps to helping from the ground up?
All right, Officer Prince, if you would like, you could go first.
Okay, I didn't hear the question. Could you repeat it, please?
No problem. My question is, reimagining public safety, how can young people take the steps to helping from the ground up?
By interacting with the police. In the division I work in community service. And what we do from time to time is we go out to our local high schools and we have an open dialogue with them. And we find out what it is that they actually need from us. And with that open communication, it kind of puts them at ease, and it allows us to be able to better handle and interact with them. So just being out in the community, being on the school campuses, my division hosts a lot of events where we interact with the public, so we're always approachable. So that's one of the main things, feeling comfortable being able to approach us and just talk to us about whatever's on your mind.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Mr. Garcia?
Yes, sir. So I would say that's a great question to ask when we talk about reimaging public safety. How can young people take the steps from the ground up? And I think first and foremost, as young people and as a community, we have to ask ourselves, what are the elements that we identify as public safety? And to what extent does public safety take its level where it becomes protecting us, or to the level of we become violators of the law, where now we are targeted, and from a minor traffic infraction, it could escalate to ending up in county jail. So I think really reevaluating in our communities, identifying what public safety means and to what extent, and then also maybe looking into these elements and finding out which ones are no longer practices that are identified as public safety, really beneficial for the community. And then when we talk about helping from the ground up, I believe we're not only helping, but we're also speaking about our public safety. How safe do we feel in our communities? How safe do we feel calling the police if we believe something unlawful is taking place around us or that we're witnessing? I think those are questions that really have to generate from the youth and the community in talking about how does public safety look like? Does public safety, to what extent does it really benefit me, and really providing a safety in comparison of myself being a victim of these policies and laws that exist, identified as public safety. So I think really looking that into in depth and modifying it and editing it, making the changes that are necessary and required through these conversations, as Officer Prince mentioned, in the campuses, in the community, are very vital and important.
Perfect. Okay, now we can move on to Bryce, who has a question to both Frank Garcia and Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian.
Am I unmuted? Y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one thing, shout out to you, Mr. Prince, and your people's precinct friends, whatever the terminology is, because we need more groups like that around my neighborhood. My question was to be, how can we move forward and stop the cycle? But to me, what you said was the answer: interaction. These conversations, we need it worldwide, statewide, citywide, because honestly, none of this is being had anywhere else, at least in my opinion.
Well, can you hear me?
Absolutely. I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it happened because, one, we had a supervisor who allowed it to happen. And secondly, we were self-motivated. The group of officers, we had the freedom to come up with our own ideas and create the programs that we wanted and were allowed to execute them. So we could just watch the news and see that there was a need for something. And we would brainstorm and come up with ideas. And the main thing, we were given the freedom to do it. So that was key, So once we started getting out into the community, the young people began to know us. They began to invite us to their graduations, invite us to their football games. we started having them come to our ceremonies and perform as a band or as a dance group. So it was just a natural progression that, you know, we started interacting and just started appreciating and respecting each other. And from there, when the parents saw how we interacted with the children or the young adults, they let their guards down and warmed up to us as well. So, like I said, we were just given the opportunity to do it.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Is it? Am I just talking to you, or is it another officer I'm supposed to be talking to?
Okay, no, that's perfect. That's it. Thank you so much to all the speakers and the panelists who spoke right now. And now we'll have a transition in this conversation, because initially it was the youth asking the older people and the older generations the question. So now we'll be moving on to the HPD and Frank Garcia to actually asking the youth the questions. So first, I believe, Mr. Garcia, you have a question to ask both me and Avery.
Excuse me. Sorry. I have one question for Officer Prince, if that's okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So, as we've seen in city council members and their meetings with the constituents, we have heard the reference of bad apples of being of cops. And I was wondering, how can you enforce that those bad apples are able to interact with the youth in their events, as you were discussing?
To be honest with you, the bad apples don't want to interact with the youth. So they don't want to interact with the youth. So they're normally standoffish. So we just move them to the side and we focus on the positive, because there are youth who don't want to interact with officers. So what we try to do is reach out to the people who is trying to build a relationship. There are always going to be bad apples, and that's just part of it. So what you try to do is find the positive in it, and that's what we did. We had a group of positive officers who wanted to do positive things, and we did it, and we were given the freedom to do it.
Amazing answers. Okay, we can now move on to the questions to the youth.
All right. Well, again, we greatly appreciate y'all, the youth, for really being actively involved and vocal in orchestrating all these demonstrations locally in the community, and then now moving into the next point when it's about conversations. So this question is for Clinton and Avery. The first question is, what has been your experience with the police? And if you want, we'll start with Clinton first, please.
Okay, perfect. My experience with the police has definitely been a little of a roller coaster, but also pretty constant at the same time. Unfortunately, whenever I see the police in a public outing, I wouldn't necessarily say that I get nervous, but rather I would say that I just think twice about my interactions and how I would like to improve my interactions and the way that I go about it. I haven't had any serious interaction with the police, and I would believe that it's a result of my actions and the precaution that I've taken previously. So I haven't had too many interactions with the police, but unfortunately, whenever I see them in public, they aren't the first people that I would want to interact with.
All right. Thank you, Clinton. Avery, what would you like to share with us for that question?
So from my experience, I just have experience of coming home from school with my dad and just like getting pulled over in front of our driveway. And like, I just have that fear of like, what's going to happen next? Like, what's going on next? But I know from experience that things that you do, if you do them right, nothing will happen. If you do them wrong, the outcome will get you. So I always keep that in my head, and I always talk about that.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Now, the second question is information on community organizations that help youth easily available to you all. So do you believe that this type of information is easily available?
I would say that the information on community organizations are pretty apparent and they're pretty easily available, especially considering I was one of the organizers of the protest, specifically reaching out to HPD and a lot of other people in the area. It was relatively easy, and it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I thought it would be extremely hard, but I believe that many people actually want change, and it isn't just the youth that want change. So I believe that it's very easy for me to reach out to community organizations, and they're going to always have my back no matter what, and especially they're going to be able to guide me in the right place and if they don't have the resources, then they'll guide me to another place that does.
That's right.
Thank you, Clinton. Avery?
Yes, I am a part of many organizations that help me with this stuff, like Man Talk, my church at Willowridge, Houston Catholic, the Westbury Gents, and the Chauncey Global Project. All of these organizations have taught me about police. These police, they come out and talk to us. It's great how they come out into the community and talk to us teens and younger kids about what to do, how to handle situations, what not to do, and just other stuff. It just amazes me how the HPD, they treat us like we're actual humans.
All right. Thank y'all, gentlemen. Now, the third question, starting with you, Clinton. From your perspective, do you see community organizations that target youth being effective? If not, why? And how can we improve that relation?
I believe that there are many organizations that are very effective. A specific organization is this thing called the Alief Community Center, and that center right there, I would believe, changed my life, especially considering that almost every Wednesday that me and my friends would go there to play basketball, and that was just an outlet that just took not only us off the streets, but just something to do, because many people just get bored, and that boredom just results in many things that we don't want to see, of course. And it definitely goes in, it's not even just funding at this point, it's just time commitment, because some people believe that they just don't have the time to be able to commit to the youth. And as a result of them not taking that extra step of investing in the youth and taking that extra step of just listening to some of their stories, it makes those people feel like their voices aren't heard, and therefore they turn to things like crime. And that's the main reason. It's not even just that the kids are bored or they have nothing to do, but it's really because they have no one else there to actually look out for them. So it goes beyond just funding, and it just takes one person or one organization to just take the time to actually listen to these kids' stories and help them with their story, in my opinion.
Amen. That was good. That's right.
Thank you, Clinton. Avery?
Yes, I am involved in a lot of organizations that help me with volunteering and telling us teens about what's going on in the outside world. They give us that motivational speech that like keeps us going every day. Like I share this like with my friends and just with other teens that's like not a part of stuff, and I like tell them to like be a part of this, you know, this stuff that would just help everybody just to spread the word. Because us teens, we have voices too. Let's see. Other organizations like the Chauncey Global Project helps us become a better man. The Houston Catholic League helps us get scholarships so us teens can go to college. Westbury Gents, I know there's a lot of more gents in other schools, but they help us become better men too. And I think we should just all come together as one community, and we should all just like set up booths and stuff and just tell this like, hey, come to this, come to that, you know, you'll party like this, you know, get everybody off the streets and stuff. Because with my experience of me being in all organizations, I think it would change somebody's life for them to be in this. It will turn them around.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Thank you, Avery. Thank you both, Clinton and Avery, for sharing that great perspective, insight, and really hitting it on the target when you talk about expressing yourself and calling it what it is. Thank y'all, gentlemen. So now we'll transition the next phase of questions to Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian, and these questions will be directed to Bryce and Miracle.
Thank you. And again, gentlemen, those were phenomenal responses, and I'm so very proud of your leadership in your communities. Keep up the great work. Let me move on. Okay, so in your perspective, Bryce and Miracle, how can we as the police work with you to strengthen the relationship between our young people and law enforcement?
You want to go first, Miracle?
Sure thing. So in my perspective, to strengthen any relationship, especially with youth and law enforcement, there needs to be that transparency and the open, direct line of contact, as Officer Prince mentioned before and earlier. And to ensure that, I liked how we mentioned the open talks, and we need to start that not only in middle school and high schools, but especially in elementary schools, to ensure that they know that they can have a secure relationship with an officer and not fear them at all. And I do believe that we need to have the transparency and the open line of contact. Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you. Bryce?
What I would say is exactly what we're doing now. I don't know who asked the question, who answered earlier. Somebody had asked, is this information easily available and stuff like that? For me, the answer would be a no. 100% no, because majority of people I know and whatnot, they don't know what to do when it comes to a complaint. They don't know about things like this. They've never seen a police officer clean for anything more than an arrest, and it's been the same for me.
Yep.
I didn't know police could go and talk to people and come to schools. I didn't think that was a thing, and I think that same mindset is the same for a lot of people my age as well. And I think just more things like this is what we need.
That's a great answer. And education is key. And I'd like to share with your council members before this is over some of the programs that we have that you guys can be involved in and take leadership in, to come in and ask us questions about, so you can learn more about us and we can in turn learn more about you. My second question is, have you ever known someone who has directly been involved in a police shooting?
I guess I'll take this one. Directly in a police shooting, yes, but for me that wasn't the most crucial, because I think for me it's just I had a friend. He's on parole. He's about 16, and his parole officer came to check in or whatever, and in about 5 minutes, because he was on duo with me, because he likes to FaceTime me because he doesn't really feel secure in situations like this. In about 5 minutes, he was slammed on the ground with his little sister, got a bunch of cuts and stuff on his face. I see a lot more of that all the time than I do see shootings. And that's just what it's never happened to me personally, but I just see a lot of it in other people and family, uncles. Those are situations I see weekly.
That's very unfortunate. Miracle, have you known anyone who has been directly involved in a police shooting?
I thank God, and I am fortunate enough to say that I do not know someone directly who has been involved in a police shooting.
That's great to hear. Thank you. I think the next questions are for Officer Prince.
No, I believe there's one more question. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, next question. I'm sorry. Officer Prince should have a question to Diego and Aaron as well.
Okay, my question to the young people is, do you have any police officers who live in your community? And if not, do you think it would be helpful if you could actually just approach them in a non-threatening manner, just a casual manner, and be able to talk to someone, just as another community member or neighbor?
Yes.
You do have police officers who live in your community, or it would be easier to approach them if you did?
I mean, I was just answering because nobody said anything. I thought you were talking to a specific person.
No.
Yeah, so whoever responded, if you can identify yourself, and so because y'all are on the phone call, it'll be helpful once you respond to identify your name. so we know who's speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, this question was targeted to Diego and Aaron. So Diego, do you have an answer to the question?
All right. So usually I'm not the type to interact with police officers, and I think that a lot of other people in the community, because of things that they see like on media, like in the media, and even within like our own community with bad experience that their friends or family had with officers, makes them like more scared to ever approach the officer in general.
So would you feel more comfortable if there was a police officer? Would you feel comfortable approaching them and establishing a relationship with his question? Like, would you feel?
Yeah, I think that any interaction that people in the community have with the police that is like nonviolent and overall like positive strengthens ties, like Officer Prince brought up earlier, because if you see people like having good interaction with the police and not like being abused by the police, the more trusting in the force, like in the long run.
So would you, as an individual, would you feel comfortable like that if you saw, you know, just walking up to a police officer and establishing a relationship or just having a conversation, you would feel comfortable?
Yes.
Okay.
That's an amazing answer. We can now move on to Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian asking a question to Serenity.
Yes, Ms. Serenity, what can we do as the Houston Police Department to appear more approachable to the community as opposed to appearing as a threat, if you see us as a threat? Serenity, are you there?
Let's go ahead and open this question up to everyone who's on. Evelyn, how about you? What can HPD do to seem more approachable to the community as opposed to a threat?
What HPD can pretty much do, so what HPD pretty much can do for us to be more approachable to us, have more community events and involvement for the youth, so we know that they're individuals we can count on and know that they're there to help us and not hurt us, as we've seen in past events.
And Evelyn, can I follow? And what would that look like to you, though? Right. So when we talk about community and engagement, and you know, kind of having these things, what do you visualize when you're saying, you know, more events in the community? Is it where the young people get to quarterly meet with the officers in their community? Is it inviting officers to your events or things that y'all are interested in? Like, how do you visualize that so you can better help us on how we can support you in making that happen?
Yeah, so a good event was how we held the protest, and it was good to know how HPD was there for us throughout the whole way, and how it was also good to know how they were able to speak with us and know that they were there for us. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, a positive media presence and just being more involved in the process, because we also seen on social media how we only see the negative sides, but overall I just try to have more involvement and community involvement with the youth.
Okay.
Councilmember Thomas, if I can jump in right here, I do want to share an opportunity that we had in the district. We had our youth group at New Faith Church. They put a program on with our Southwest Police Station and the DRT officers. It was really exciting because what happened was we had some of our officers to come and play basketball with the youth at the church. But the students didn't know that the gentlemen that came to play basketball with the youth at the church were police officers. They just thought they were at the church to play basketball with the young people. And then after they played basketball, had a little lunch, the youth were brought to the HPD police station. And the officers went, changed clothes, and put their police uniforms on, and then walked into the room to have a discussion with our youth about police interactions and answer any questions that they had. And it was amazing to see the responses on the young people's faces when they realized that the officers were the same cool guys that were playing basketball with them earlier that day. And they said, "Oh my goodness, you're a police officer? I didn't know you were a police officer." Just to see that genuine interaction was a testament to the fact that police officers are people too. They are friendly, they are here to help, and they want to be the police officer that you grew up knowing that the police officer is your friend. Of course, there are bad people in everything, not just in policing, but in everything we do. But it's important to build those relationships. And I was so proud of our HPD officers for wanting to build the relationships with the students in our community. So that was just a great example of a way we can help to build trust between our young people and our officers in the community.
Absolutely. And Evelyn, if there's some ideas that y'all would like to think of as a follow-up, please let me know and we can make some things happen.
When was it? Because I got a new place. I didn't know that happened.
Say it again.
I said I go to New Faith, and I didn't even know that happened. When was it?
Yeah, that was probably a couple of months ago. The youth group came and they did a tour of the HPD police station. Officer Prince, you were there. Do you know Aaron Lewis, Pastor Lewis's son? And there was probably about 30 kids from New Faith that came and did the tour of the police station and played basketball with the officers.
Amazing. We love to see that, especially having cooperation between HPD and just regular police officers having regular interactions can definitely change the public's view. So now I believe we can move on to Mr. Garcia asking Angela a question.
And if you want to consider, because you do have some of your peers on, if you want to open it up, because we do have quite a few questions in the live Q&A from people in the community, and you have some colleagues that are posing questions as well. So keep in mind,
perfect. I think this will be a perfect time to ask one of them. So I believe this question has no real target, but the first question we'll ask is, it's from Candace that's watching. What percentage of the Houston police live in the areas that they police? And does this department encourage or incentivize this, especially for supposedly high crime areas? So I believe the officers that we have on the call would be the best ones to answer that question.
That question came up a little earlier. Again, I don't have that percentage, but I think Officer Whitaker, with his response from his colleagues today, indicates that there are officers that live in the communities that they work in. Do we provide incentives to live in communities? No, that's not something that we do.
But Officer Victoria, I do want to jump in and say that the city of Houston does have a program to help officers that want to live inside the city. We do have some down payment assistance for police officers that want to move inside the city. So there is that available for police officers that want to live in the city.
Hey, Candace, this is Officer Whitaker, and I will tell you that when you spend 40 plus hours a week in your patrol area and you get to know the people in your patrol area, you've been out there for quite some time, whether it's the young people at the stores or whether it's from going call to call, whatever the case may be, sometimes it feels like home. So I would say for the officer that is out there on patrol and has been in a patrol area for quite some time, him coming to work and protecting his area, it would be like protecting his home. And that's how it was for me for 33 years on the streets. I was taking care of my neighbors and my friends.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, now we can definitely move on to Mr. Garcia asking Angela the question. Asking Angela a couple of questions.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so the question for Angela, the first one, how familiar are you with knowing your rights when encountering police? Do you believe it should be taught in schools?
Angela, make sure you unmute your phone with *6. Unmute your phone.
Yes, I just did. Hi,
Okay.
Mr. Garcia.
Good evening.
I am not really familiar with my rights. So if I was to get encountered by an officer, I really wouldn't even know what to do. I believe it should be taught at school because most of the things that we are taught in school, it will not really help us that much in the real world. But something like this, having a program or a class like this will really help a lot of students out, especially on this side of town.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Angela, for that. Now, the second question, is school policing on your campus helping your safety and education? Why or why not?
I believe it is helping, especially when they're student-to-student interaction, when there's something going on, the police do come and try to solve the whole issue. So I believe yes.
That's an amazing answer. Okay, we can now move on to the live Q&A because in the chat, if you guys didn't know, there have actually been people watching and listening, and a couple of the people that are just regular citizens have a couple of questions to all of us that are on this panel. So I'll move this on to Tristan, who will be reading all of the questions.
The first question is from Jason. He said, what opportunities has the HPD identified for meeting the public's request to defund the police or invest in the community?
So we have not, I think that our chief has made it very clear that defunding the police is like a false equivalency. If you guys, if you compare Houston with the same size of Chicago, Chicago has 12,000 police officers, and they still have crime that's off the chart. Houston, we still have our level of crime, as violent crime, and we've cut back on our budget for several years. But I don't think that defunding the police is an option. But opportunities for improvement, if we had funding available, I'd like to see money invested in mental health. I'd like to see money invested in homelessness. I'd like to see money invested in youth programs and youth opportunities and education opportunities. So there are several areas where I think the police respond to some social issues that if we provided money to grassroots communities, grassroots organizations to be able to handle some of those issues, then it would free us from having to interact or having negative interactions with people that we're not trained properly to deal with. Now, we have training to deal with mental health, with homeless, but those people are experts and have gone to school to do that. So if there was extra money, I would like to see it put to those different organizations.
Hey, this is Tim. May I jump in on this question?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the defunding, I think unfortunately, some of the first things that would go would maybe be some of the programs that help the community. And in my office here at DRT at Westside, one of the officers that I sit next to is part of the Police Activity League. And if I were a younger officer, I would be very, very jealous, but he goes down to Alief and he plays basketball with some of the folks down there. And we have an Explorer program. On the Explorer program, it's young people. I would say probably 95% of his people are from the Alief area. And that is an organization where they come and meet here once a week and they learn some police tactics, what we do, what we don't do, what we can do, what we can't do. And he told me just today, out of that Explorer program here at Westside, 15 of those people have gone on into a military career and 5 have become police officers. So there is money that is being wisely spent in the communities.
Okay, made a point, Tim.
Thank
That's
you.
perfect. Tristan,
The next
the next
question is, it's from Jeanette. A powerful tool is education. What can the youth and people of color do to help end systemic racism when our schools teaches a European perspective of American history and our education quality is based on property taxes? This question can be open to everyone.
Everyone as in like the students too?
Yes. This
Yes.
is yours.
Well, number one, I think the question what really systemic racism is. I think it exists, but not to the extent that people push it toward. But also, it's just that when it comes to looking at what we learn in the classroom, of course, looking at American history, yeah, you're not gonna see what's catered to the true-born Americans. You're not gonna see much of a black person, Hispanic person. You're not gonna see much in there. It's not your history. I think it's a level of common sense and a level of you actually searching for it.
Thank you very much. The next question is from
Is there not
Candace.
anyone who wants to respond? Respond to that, to his comments. I mean, there should be a dialogue between speakers.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I want to say about
And
systemic
who's
racism.
speaking? Who's speaking?
This is Diego.
Diego. Okay.
So I think that systemic racism is like a huge problem in like communities of color because they just face like disproportionate disadvantages that a lot of other groups don't see. Not only like because of slavery and like the hundreds of years of like just a head start that other communities had over black people, but also things like redlining, the war on drugs, which disproportionately affected people of color. And that also kind of created like a culture in the late 20th century of making things such as like gangbanging or things like that, like stealing, seem cool. And that still like affects people to this day, and that culture still exists. So I think that because these communities like have been for so long like underfunded, and that led to like this culture being created, to this day, even when these communities aren't as funded as they should be, this culture still exists. And that these people like just feel that that's like the way life is. And that's really hard to change because of just what they've been through historically.
Right.
I'd like to answer that from the police perspective. Let me tell you what we're doing. This is not involved in schools and in the school districts, but this training cycle in 2021, I'm working with a professor from the University of Houston, Professor Albert Brown, and we are developing a course on the historical traumas of policing. There are a lot of our younger officers that don't understand why there's so much anger in the Black and brown community. So we're going to address the police roles in historically in racism, during Jim Crow, during Bloody Sunday, when we're talking about the Holocaust and the roles that the police officers played. Then we're going to bring it up to more recent incidents involving police corruption or involving relationships that have, broken our relationships with the community. So I think that that's a great move forward because it allows our officers to understand some of the history behind our anger. So as far as the police department is concerned, we are going to tackle that this training cycle for every officer that's assigned in a class, every classified officer with HPD.
Kristen? No, we cannot hear you. Sorry, Tristan.
The next question is from Jason, and he said, how do students view the presence of police in schools as the district around the country reduces the number of schools, resources, officers?
So the question is, how do students view the presence of police in schools as districts around the country reduce the number of school resource officers, excuse me?
Well, we don't have a representative from any independent school district. And so in Texas, just so y'all have some background. So in Texas, we have independent school districts and the school, and so that's a separate jurisdiction. So your superintendent also has an elected board of trustees. I'm a former board of trustee, and I believe you have a couple of Alief ISD trustees on the call listening in. And so that question is better directed to them because Alief ISD has its own police department, and they work with social workers and the police department to respond to certain needs. So that's not a question that we can answer today.
Thank you. For the students, are you all concerned about your safety when interacting with school police officers or administrators? And do you feel safe and heard when reporting incidents of police or administrator inappropriate behaviors?
This is Clinton speaking to answer that question. I feel as if that question should be separated in two, considering that the police and administration and the interactions between those are completely different. When it comes to the school police officers, actually, I would say that I've had the best interactions with them, as like we have the dogs are super nice, etc. And the police officers are much more, not necessarily lenient, but rather they're more understanding in certain situations. So let's say that there was a fight. I know people that have gotten into fights and they chose that they would rather choose police officers over administration, especially the school security guards, to talk to and conversate with because they're a lot more understanding. So tackling the administrators, I feel as if a lot of administrators that I've had and came in contact with is specifically the administrators are actually not as understanding and they take more of the strict route and in terms of like how to approach situations. And that's something that I don't like and I dislike mainly because then it continues a form of not attacking and talking to the administrator, but seeing them as like a source of precaution and not somebody that I would want to talk to.
Interesting.
Did anybody else have any feedback around that?
And for me, I just always consider what's going to happen. It's always a variety of things that can happen, no matter if it's a school officer, whether somebody's getting pulled over in a car. It's never one answer for me. I just take precaution always and see where it goes. And I also agree with what the previous answer was when it comes to talking to an administrator versus a police officer.
Thank you. So questions to everyone. What sort of change, legislative change, ordinance change, does HPD support that would follow through complaints of misconduct filed against officers?
One of the things that I think that we support wholeheartedly is when an officer has sustained complaints of police misconduct, not those that are investigated and are not sustained, but when they're sustained, that they could be made public. And other agencies need to know that these officers have sustained complaints just in case they're fired or terminated from HPD, and they'll be able to see that these officers have a history of a certain type of behavior.
And can I respond to that as well? I think this is Councilmember Tiffany Thomas. So what we did on Thursday, and I don't know if my colleague Councilmember Abby Kamen is on the call, but she chairs our public safety, and I think we had almost an 8-hour meeting where we listened to recommendations from the public and organizations and advocacy groups regarding that very thing. And I would like to invite you, not just necessarily asking us, but what would you like to see? And that may give us an opportunity to do a few things. One, educate and inform on what's already currently happening. And then secondly, give you an opportunity to help us make that better. And so for instance, I know y'all are, probably still asleep at 9 o'clock, but this morning we had a city council meeting. And last week we had tagged an item, and tag is to delay. And so we tagged an item regarding a grant application for body cameras. So currently HPD does have body cameras. And so this was an application for us to get new equipment because the current equipment it's on its last leg, right? And so the ask for transparency is tied to those types of decisions. And one of the reasons it was tagged because it was a question of the body cam policy. So we do have body cam footage policy that is readily available for public review. And what we have asked the mayor to do and the police reform task force, as well as the public safety committee, is to look at that policy and to look at how we can make the connection to disciplinary actions when officers do behave badly, particularly when there's bodily injury to a resident, right? And so those are the things that we are exploring. So right now we are gathering all of this information. And if you think of something that you would like for council or council committee, the mayor's office to consider, please, let's continue to stay in touch so we can make sure that we are really putting the public into public policy. And we want to make sure that a limited group of people are not making decisions for everyone, but that everyone has an opportunity to participate in that.
Excellent. So for our teens, how do teens use their role as leaders to influence other teens to get active?
Can
I'll answer this, Mike Clinton. Oh. I can go. Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Definitely, I would say social media plays a pretty big role. And like for a very long time, I've used social media, and I've always attempted to build my social media base to a point where it's just like anytime that I would meet a lot of people, I would be able to have something such as social media like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc., to reach out to. So when I personally organized the protest with my other friends and peers, I feel like social media played a very big role, considering the only way that we actually got the word out was posting one flyer on Instagram, which got over 3,000 shares. So I'd say that social media is definitely something that holds accountability for our peers because they see it constantly. And whenever they go on Instagram, they go on Twitter, they go on Snapchat, that's the first thing that they see. And that's the thing that they see on everybody's page who's reposting it. So especially whenever you have social media as a role, it's the number one thing that kids are using now. So it's definitely the number one way to get information out. And that's the way that I have more cooperation.
All right. So one other really good question that we had in the chat box was focused around how we can continue these types of conversations. And so it says, I think consistency is key. How can we continue these discussions between the police department and the community, and how can the media get involved so they can spread more awareness about the discussions that are going on? That way, more people from the community, aside from the youth, can be involved.
This is Vice Mayor Pro Tem Martha Castex Tatum, and I want to invite our youth to participate in our monthly PIP meetings. We have a monthly PIP meeting at our police stations, and rarely do we have any young people, and that could be just a communication issue. That, you know, I am working with our neighborhood organizations and encouraging them to put a high school student and a college student on their HOA and civic club boards, because we want our young people to be more involved. So this is my invitation to each of you to attend our monthly PIP meetings. In those meetings, the officers talk about different topics each month. And then it's another opportunity for you to meet the officers that patrol your area. So that is one way you can continue to be engaged with your officers. And then as a council member, I know that I am happy to host these quarterly. If you say, council member, I have invited 25 of my friends to get online and talk about our concerns in the community, we can set up another meeting. I know that Councilmember Thomas would be happy to do so as well. So your voice is important. And we want you to reach out and talk to your friends and let them know that you had this opportunity to speak with the Vice Mayor Pro Tem, with Councilmember Thomas, and with Assistant Chief from HPD and other officers, and my brother's keeper. This is a great platform, and because you were a part of it, now you can go out and tell your peers how they can also be a part of it, and we can expand the reach of building the relationship.
And this is Tim Whitaker, and I agree with the council member there. I'm over here at the police station at Derry Ashford and Richmond. If you live in Alief, you certainly know where this big building is here on Derry Ashford. You guys are more than welcome to come by here any Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday at 1 o'clock is when I get to work, and I'll walk downstairs. And if it wasn't for COVID, I'd take you over to grab a hamburger or something. But because of COVID, maybe we can just talk at the front desk. But you guys are welcome to come to West at any time. I can show you around the station. I can introduce you to some officers. I would be more than welcome. I'm so impressed with some of the questions that I would be more than welcome to have y'all over here at my station and some more dialogue.
I think that's great. And to piggyback off of Vice Mayor Pro Tem and Tim Whitaker, this is Chief Victorian, we have several programs that you guys can get involved and take a leadership role in. Outside of our Explorer programs, for those that are interested in law enforcement, Councilmember Taylor mentioned our PIP meetings, and we also have Citizens Police Academies. You can come do a ride-along where you can ride along with an officer and ask those questions and ask those tough questions and see what the role of the police is in the community. Come visit. You can come visit 1200 Travis. You make an appointment, and I'm at the building. You're more than welcome to come up and see what it is to, our role as a police chief, and visit our staff and to see what our other divisions and stuff are about. And a lot of our programs are online. If you go to the Houston Police Department's website from the city of Houston, you'll see some of the programs that you can get involved in. And we encourage you guys to get involved and ask questions and learn more about what you can do to help us improve. And we'd like to learn more about you and get you involved in some of the activities and things we do in the community.
That's amazing. And I honestly hope that to everyone on this call, speaking out to my youth, that if you feel like you need more reform and want to know more, that you should look out for these programs. Thank you to everyone. We'll now be moving on to the closing remarks.
So hello everyone, my name is Edie. I'm with Councilmember Thomas's office. We just wanted to share our gratitude to all of those who were involved in tonight's event. Thank you, Councilmember Tiffany Thomas, Vice Mayor Pro Tem Hastings Tatum, my brother's keeper, the Houston Police Department, and the student panel. We also thank council staff for their time and effort in coordinating this event. It is a hope that this conversation does not end here and does not end without action. We heard conversation in relation to police and patrol officers and their experiences and duties. We heard the conversation of community interaction and partnership with police officers. And we heard the conversation on suggested solutions to ensure consistent and constant public safety. We heard some next steps to take, and we cannot stand still. Please be on the lookout for District F's youth conference that is scheduled for this fall. And remember to fill out your census, mask up. And again, thank you for joining us in this conversation. We sign off now, but let us continue to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, thank y'all. Y'all are the real MVPs. And so
Absolutely.
y'all are
Great
the real
job.
MVPs. So thank you, young people. Appreciate your energy, your effort. Let's stay in touch. Let's continue to have this conversation. And let us know how we can support you because we sit in an elected position. So allow us to use our office to advance your issue.
All right. Y'all have a super evening. Great job.